Right, Psalm 139. O Lord, you have searched me and you know me. You know when I sit and when I rise. You perceive my thoughts from afar. You discern my going out and my lying down. You are familiar with all my ways. Before a word is on my tongue, you know it completely, O Lord. You hem me in, behind and before. You have laid your hand upon me. Such knowledge is too wonderful for me, too lofty for me to attain. Where can I go from your spirit? Where can I flee from your presence? If I go up to the heavens, you are there. If I make my bed in the depths, you are there. If I rise on the wings of the dawn, if I settle on the far side of the sea, even there your hand will guide me. Your right hand will hold me fast. If I say, surely the darkness will hide me, and the light become night around me, even the darkness will not be dark to you. The night will shine like the day, for darkness is as light to you. For you created my inmost being. You knit me together in my mother's womb. I praise you because I am fearfully and wonderfully made. Your works are wonderful, I know that full well. My frame was not hidden from you when I was made in the secret place, when I was woven together in the depths of the earth. Your eyes saw my unformed body. All the days ordained for me were written in your book before one of them came to be. How precious to me are your thoughts, O God! How vast is the sum of them! Were I to count them, they would outnumber the grains of sand. When I awake, I am still with you.
The second reading is Matthew 6:19 to 24. Treasures in heaven. Do not store up for yourselves treasures on earth, where moth and rust destroy, and where thieves break in and steal. But store up for yourselves the treasures in heaven, where moth and rust do not destroy, and where thieves do not break in and steal. For where your treasure is, your heart will also be. The eye is the lamp of the body. If your eyes are good, the whole body will be filled with light. But if your eyes are bad, your whole body will be full of darkness. If then the light within you is darkness, how great is that darkness? No one can serve two masters. Either he will hate one and love the other, or he will be devoted to one and despise the other. You cannot serve both God and money. May the Lord bless these words.
Amen. Amen. Thank you very much, folks. There's a line in that gospel reading that we just had where Jesus talked, your eye is the lamp of your body. I mean, that was the thinking of at the time. Yeah, the thinking at the time was that there was the sort of the medical thinking, to be honest, and he's just alluding to it. That the idea was that the light was in you and your eyes were like headlights on a car and the light shone out of you. All right? But it's actually the other way around, as we know. The light comes into your eye and illuminates you from inside. Jesus knew this. He's the Son of God. He's the creator of every human eyeball. And never mind the whole of creation as well. But he comes out with that line. If your eyes are bad, if you can't see properly what is around you, if you can't see and understand what's around you, then inside of you is dark. You're not woken up. You're not illuminated. As I was sitting listening to Trevor read it, I thought, I should have picked a particular song this morning, which I didn't. Open my eyes, Lord, I want to see Jesus. Or open the eyes of our heart, Lord, even better. Yeah, so that we can see what's going on. And if you've been reading The Purpose-Driven Life this week, you'll see that these opening 7 chapters have been kind of a preamble for the 5 purposes in life that are going to be following in the next 5 weeks, all right? So this has been an introduction. And I hope you found it interesting and illuminating, yeah? And made you think a little bit differently about you yourself, about all of us, yeah? It's good stuff. And it says a lot of things that perhaps we knew anyway, but we kind of put on the back burner, or perhaps we hadn't even fully appreciated before. If we could only have God open our eyes, the eyes of our heart, our inner eye, to illuminate our insides, as it were, and to understand what our true place in creation is, that this life is just the rehearsal, the training for the next life, to see ourselves as God sees us, as eternal beings that he has created and that he knows so well. We would think very differently about our lives. And as Christians, I'm sure a lot of us, if not all of us, we've had our eyes opened. The scales have fallen off, as happened to Paul when he was blinded, Saul, and then was prayed for, and his eyes were opened again. But our eyes have been opened to the fact that we are beloved of God, and we're going to go on forever. So up on the screen we have a title page, and I'm just going to kind of précis what we've been reading about this week. And if you've not got the book and you're not reading it, don't worry, this is fine. This is just like a standard sort of sermon type scenario. The first sentence in the first chapter of the book, I always found a huge relief. You have this book, you see that it's a fair old length, it's going to take you 40 days to get through it. And you read the first sentence in the first chapter, and it says, it's not about you. I find that really comforting. Hopefully you don't find it intimidating. The universe does not revolve around you or me. It's not all about us. The whole weight, the whole burden of responsibility does not rest on you or on me. It's all about God. God is the beginning and the end. Everything that happens in the whole of creation is about God, and it's for God, and it's of God. And I just think, phew, I can relax a bit then. That's brilliant. It's not about me anymore. I'm not living for myself anymore. Most of us live for ourselves. We're taught to live for ourselves. We're brought up to look after ourselves, to do things which will prosper us materially and emotionally. Yeah? But it's actually not about us at all. That's the first important thing. Second most important thing, and this was in chapter 2, which the opening sentence of that is very comforting as well. You are not an accident. You might have been told by your parents that you were an accident. Oh, we never intended to have you. It's amazing how many parents will say that to you at some point or another. Well, we never intended to have you. We meant to stop at 6 and then you came along. Or whatever it might be. Yeah, you're not an accident. There is no one who is alive or who has ever lived in this world who is here by accident, who is not intended to be alive. Every one of us is here for a reason. Every one of us is here because God has created us and God has loved us. We're here for a reason. Sorry, can you go back? My inadvertent pointing, I'm just going to quote that bit of scripture there from Psalm 139. Psalm 139 is one of the most wonderful psalms. It's one of the best known psalms as well. I'm sure you know it. It's worth digging out again when you get home if you're not familiar with it. But it just tells us everything, that God knows everything about us. And he's known everything about us since before we were born. Never mind the date of our birth. Before our mum even knew we were there inside her, growing secretly, God knew we were there. There it is. Your eyes saw my unformed body. All the days ordained for me were written in your book before one of them came to be. Verse 6 of Psalm 139. So this means that God knew about us before we even started. And we read elsewhere in Scripture that God had chosen us before the creation of the world. So long before we were even thought of. Before you were even twinkled in your dad's eye. The Lord knew all about you. Not only did he know about your origins, but he knows how long you were going to be on this planet and what you're going to do and where you're going to live. He knows all of it. None of it is secret to him. You have to understand the thing about God is that he exists outside of time. Time is something that God has created. When you start reading at the beginning of the book of Genesis, it talks about the only thing that's there is God. And there is no clock ticking. There is no time moving forwards or backwards or sideways even. It just doesn't exist. And God starts the clock. And when you've got scientists looking back to try and discover the origins of the universe from a scientific perspective, I find it really encouraging that the more they look, the deeper they look, the more they start thinking that there must be a God, there must be something that's caused it, something that's kicked it off. For some while back, a decade or two ago, the Big Bang seemed to be the answer to everything. Oh, it's the Big Bang, isn't it? It's not God, it's the Big Bang. And you think, well, what caused the Big Bang? Oh, right, okay. Weren't there these two clouds of gas floating about and they collided? Yeah. Well, there you go. Well, who put them there? Oh, crikey, yeah. There must be a point of origin. And it's outside of time. And God decides, for his pleasure, as we'll be discovering in the week to come in our readings, for his pleasure, he wants to make stuff. Like a lot of you, if you're left alone for long enough, you want to make something. Yeah, I enjoy making something, creating something, a thing of beauty, a work of art. You might like to sew something, or to knit something, or to paint something, yeah, or to write something. God is exactly the same because we share his nature. He wanted to create something. And when you create something, you want to create something to bring pleasure to you. So God knows your past, and he knows your future. If you feel slightly alarmed by the idea that God knows your future, don't be. Because it says in that often quoted passage in Jeremiah 29, which I'm sure you know off by heart the same as me and Adele do, because it's been spoken over us so many times. I know the plans I have for you, says the Lord. Plans to prosper you and not to harm you, plans to give you hope and a future. So when you say God knows the date of my death, and you go, well, that's not a bad thing. That's a good thing, because nothing is hidden from him. And if we move on to the next bit, what drives you? Do you remember reading about this? The things that drive you in life. And there's a few of them. Here they come. First one is guilt. We were talking together about this and saying which one of these 4 or 5 that were on the list drives you. And somebody said all of them. And I think that's true to a greater or lesser extent. But let's just take a few moments to reflect on what we read. So guilt. If you're driven by guilt, it means that in the past you have failed to do something well, or you've messed something up. And you've hurt people, or you've let people down, you've let yourself down, and that is what drives you forward. You think, I made that colossal mistake and I need to pay for it. And some people spend the whole of the rest of their life paying off a guilt trip that they're under for no purpose at all. People say about Christians, people who are agnostic or atheist, but they really ought to know better. They say, you Christians, you're driven by guilt. You feel guilty about your human condition, the fact that you're all sinners, that you get things wrong, that you mess things up. And that's what makes you go to church every Sunday in the hope that somehow you might make yourself better and sort of pay off this terrible debt of guilt that you've got. And maybe that God will sort of grow to like you and let you into heaven. And it's not that way at all. Because if we're driven by guilt, then we're ultimately just pushing forward, trying to put things right. And the fact is, God hasn't made a mistake with you. Not at all. You're a success story. You are exactly what he wants you to be. And you say, yeah, but I've made some colossal mistakes. So have I. Absolute howlers. Sometimes the devil wakes me up in the middle of the night and reminds me of one of them. Does he do that to you? He'll go, remember that time, Ralph, when you said that? And I go, oh, yeah, I do. And then God says, well, forget about it. It's done. It's dealt with. You said, sorry, it's fine. I knew you were going to do it anyway, because you are a bit of an idiot, Ralph, but that's the way I've made you, and I'm actually very happy with that. Yeah, the best pottery is flawed pottery and all the rest of it, The best works of art are slightly flawed. Nothing's perfect. You are who I want you to be. We wouldn't be human if we didn't make mistakes. But if you let your mistakes control you and define your future, that's when we've got a problem. Do not let the mistakes of your past define your future. Define who you are. Oh, I'm just an idiot. No, you're not. God has declared you to be wonderful, unique, marvellous, in the words of Psalm 139, fearfully and wonderfully made. You're not a loser. You're not a mistake. You're not an accident. God knows you. You're vulnerable, you're flawed, but you're wonderful. Leave that guilt behind. Jesus died on a cross, carrying the whole weight of our guilt for all the stupid things we've ever done. So don't keep carrying it around yourself. Let him have it. Let him take it. 2,000 years ago, he took it from you. Don't try and take it back. As scripture says, and I forget where it is, cast your burdens onto Jesus because he cares for you. He wants to relieve you of that burden of guilt. Don't let it drive you. The next one on the list is resentment. It's different to guilt. If somebody is, it's not your failing or you being stupid that is driving you. This is other people. If somebody has been cruel to you, horrible to you, at some point in your past, and you can't let go of it, that resentment, that's a problem. And that is what drives people. It's like an anger drives them forward. And no matter the wonderful things that they achieve and the wonderful times that they have, they can't let go. I wonder if you're one of them. Don't do hands up, for goodness sake. It's between you and God. Is there somebody who's been in your life in the past and has done something horrible, said something horrible, made your life a misery in some way, dragged you down, and you can't quite bring yourself to forgive them? There's that resentment in your heart. And every now and then you keep thinking about it. And the trouble is, it makes you angry and it keeps you angry. And then in your dealings today with other people and in your future with other people, whether it's professionally or in your family or with your friendships or in your neighbourhood, you're going to get angry for no good reason because of this thing that happened in the past. And as Rick Warren points out, and he's absolutely right, the chances are that that person who hurt you so much that you can't let go of it isn't even aware that they've done it. Or if they were aware at the time, they've now forgotten about it. They don't know, they don't care. They probably don't even know you. You might not have seen them for 30 years. But you're still holding on to it. It's not hurting them, it's hurting you. And I speak with authority on this because I've nursed such feelings of resentment against people who, back along, have hurt me. And I've found it enormously difficult to let go of them, to the extent that I've gone, is there something wrong in your head, Ralph? You know that you don't want this. You know you don't want to feel this way. Why can't you put it down? It's the same as guilt. On our own, sometimes we can, but other times we really can't. And we need help. These days, in an agnostic society, a lot of people turn to psychiatrists and counsellors. They do cognitive therapy, and all of this stuff is fine. It's all very helpful, but it's not the whole answer. You talk about mindfulness. I'm sure mindfulness is a wonderful thing, but it's so unfocused that it might have some short-term benefit. The only way to fix yourself up, to free yourself of guilt and resentment for things that are in your past, is to give it to God. And if you think, I don't think yes, he does want it. He hung on a cross, dying in awful pain to take your burden of guilt and resentment. Don't let them drive. Don't have it. If Satan brings it into your head again, kick it out. Tell him to get lost. Or other words to that effect. Next up, fear. Sometimes we're driven by the fear of, well, maybe we've done stuff in the past, we've been cycling along, we've, done it, gone a bit risky and we've come off and hurt ourselves, speaking again from experience. And that puts you off from doing it again, If you fall off your horse, it's quite hard to get back on the horse again, isn't it? You think, I think I'm done with that now, I think I'm done with horse riding after that fall, whatever it was. If you have a car accident, God forbid, it's hard to get back in the car afterwards and drive again with any confidence. You're living in fear. And there are so many examples of that in life. Things happen to us and it makes us fearful of us repeating the experience. What if I do it again? What if it happens again? Better then, maybe not to bother. My parents, don't know about your parents, don't know about you. My dad went to work every day of his life. He worked really hard, etc., etc. The nice house, nice car, family, blah, 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 all the rest of it. But they got to the point where they really didn't want to do anything else, just in case something went wrong. And the older we all get, we appreciate that maybe there aren't things that we can do quite the same as we used to do. Somebody said to me the other day, why don't you try surfing, Ralph? And I'm like, no, I think that ship has sailed, And they go, no, you can do it. No, I'm worried I'm going to hurt myself, Certain things, But if we allow fear to drive everything in our lives like that, oh, I better not do that. You know, what if it goes wrong? I'm scared of it going wrong. Our life becomes very limiting. So we don't go out very much. We daren't form friendships in case that person hurts us in some way, because we've experienced that before. So it's fear of the future stops us from enjoying life as much as we should. And again, God says, look, I've given you a set of skills. I've given you experience. I've given you that wonderful, unique personality that all of you have. And I want you to use them. Remember what happened in the parable of the talents. The guy had been given a lot of talents. He was good at all sorts of things. And he used them all to maximum effect and achieved amazing stuff. And then it goes down to the guy who just got the one talent. And he doesn't think he's been given much. And he's worried about losing that one thing he's got. So he buries it and he doesn't do anything with it. God is not pleased. God says, go on, step out in faith and do stuff. And it is true that I did a sermon about this a few weeks ago. You are more likely to be lucky for things to go well for you if you're not frightened of taking those risks. If you're confident and positive about stepping forward and doing stuff, you are much more likely to achieve it. The way that Rick Warren puts it in the book, he says, if you talk to people and say, how long do you think you're going to live? And they say, I'm going to live till I'm 95, 105. They are more likely to achieve that than somebody who says, oh, I don't know, bad family history, I'll struggle to get to 60, all the rest of it. Interesting, isn't it? Don't allow fear to hold you back, says God, because I've got you. I'm holding you in the palm of my hand. I'm sheltering you under the shadow of my wing. Next up, materialism. This is a big one. You can identify it all over the place. People live to acquire stuff, to acquire money so that they can buy stuff, so they can have stuff. And it is true. If you are materially wealthy, then you are more likely to live a happy life. But it's not the end of the story by any means. I've met some really wealthy people who are the most miserable people I have ever met. Not only were they most miserable, they were the most prejudiced, because they were in a position where they could look down at so many people and say, oh, look at your shoes, look at your car, look at the part of town you live in. Oh, you're not as good as me. That arrogance, that pride, so often referred to in the Bible. Struggling to acquire stuff is really a waste of time. Now, John Wesley said, and he was quite right, he said, work as hard as you can and earn as much money as you can. And you think, hello, that doesn't sound right. So that you can give away as much as you can. There's nothing wrong with being a rich Christian, because it enables you to be a generous giver. It's true. But do not be defined. Do not let that be the thing that drives you to be wealthy. So many people who don't have two halfpennies to rub together live the happiest of lives. Keep your life simple. In the book it says, you're probably doing too much. Make your life less complicated. Stick to the things that God wants you to do rather than all these things you could be doing. And you'll live a simpler and happier and more contented life. And then we have this quote, oh, there's one more, I forgot about it, approval. And maybe you're driven by approval, a desire to impress people, to be approved of, You often get it from your parents, don't you? You find yourself living your life in order to please your parents' expectations, or your employer's expectations, or your own ideas of what success is. And Jesus sums all of this up in that reading that we had. No one can serve two masters. Either he will hate the one and love the other, or he'll be devoted to the one and despise the other. You cannot serve both God and money. So that's speaking particularly about being driven by materialism, but it's true of all the others on that list as well. Our aim is not to be driven by anything else in life other than a desire to please God, to do what God has set before us, his purpose for us. And if we concentrate on that and ask Jesus to take away the others, we will be happier, we will be more content, we'll be more sorted in our lives. It won't make our lives easier. It might well make our lives more difficult, certainly in the short term. Jesus said it's a narrow road, remember? It's hard to find, never mind hard to travel on, but it's worth it. And if I might quote Harry Potter to you, I believe Dumbledore once said to somebody or other, to Harry, yes, Dumbledore once said to Harry, Harry, the time has come for us to choose between the right way and the easy way. And that is very much a biblical precedent. It's choosing the easy way or the right way, the world's way or God's way. So let's have the next slide. And what's coming up here? That's it. Right, this week, what have we learned? And even if you're not reading the book, it doesn't matter, it's worth knowing. This week we've learned that we were made to last forever. If you were reading chapter 2 can be a sticking point for some people. I've known it happen before, all right? Where people have said, well, hang on a minute, God knows everything about me. He knows my past, my present, and my future. He knows how long I'm going to be on this planet. Well, that's all very well, but what about people whose lives are destined to be painfully short? What about people who die in infancy? What about people who endure terrible health challenges? What about people who never quite make it into this world? And some people have quoted examples of it. That is difficult until you read that 3rd chapter, which says, for God, this life is just the beginning. So however long or short this life is, if we had that perspective of eternity, it really wouldn't matter. It wouldn't make much of a difference, because this life is a test. This life is like basic training for the SAS. Have you watched that program? I keep referring to it, SAS, Who Dares Wins. And they put them through terrible challenges. That they're vomiting and injuring themselves, but psychologically as well. They put hoods on them and then take them in and humiliate them and bring up all the things in their past that we just identified on that slide. It's almost like, it's like a theological thing. They're trying to damage them, a psychological thing. Pull up the things that are controlling them and driving them, and then saying, put them to one side. You can be strong. You can be SAS. That's what this life is for all of us. Except most people in our modern society have lost their grip on that. They think this is all there is. And if you think this is all there is, then you are going to say it's unjust if someone only lives until they're 3 years old. It's unjust that anybody gets cancer at any time in their life. It's unjust that a child might be stillborn. It's unjust, they would say, if anybody lives with any form of mental or physical handicap. I'll bring you this little story. When I was in Dorset, being a minister there, I had to do a funeral for a child. This child was 8 years old and she died. And all of her life, she'd been profoundly disabled physically. And, well, she had some mental sort of disabilities as well. She couldn't speak, she couldn't hear, she could barely see, she couldn't walk. And yet her mum loved her with that unconditional love. Often if we want to understand God's love, we need to look at parental love. If it's working right, it doesn't always work right, but if it is working right, it gives us with a good idea of the perfect parent, which is God. And her mum loved this little girl. And they only lived down our street, so I knew them. I'd seen them around. I'd seen them. They didn't come to church, but I'd seen them. I'd seen them at church for various things. And then this little girl died, and I copped for the funeral. And I was trying to think what to say on what is essentially a tragic, everybody's feeling the hurt of it. She's only lived for 8 years, and now she's gone. And I stood up, and I was talking about it at the funeral service, and I said, don't fear for this little girl, because she might have gone from amongst us, but now she's in heaven. And then I said, which is true. And then I said, there in heaven she is completely restored. And then after the service, one of our local preachers who happened to be there came up to me and he said, "Oh, Ralph, you shouldn't have said that." I said, "What? That bit about in heaven she's fully restored. Who are you," he said, "to pass judgment on this girl's wholeness in life? Who are you to say that there's something wrong with her?" Her mother didn't think there was something wrong with her. In fact, nobody did. And I thought, oh my goodness, you're right. There are those times, aren't there, when somebody challenges you, takes you to one side and has a quiet word. And I thought, that's absolutely right. Let's none of us ever judge somebody's quality of life, because to God, God has created that person and they are exactly how he wants them to be. And lots of people have said, oh gosh, I know profoundly disabled people, and the love that I've experienced from them never mind the love I felt like returning, has been amazing and profound. Some people say, what about these, a baby that never makes it into the world? I had a couple at my church like that as well. And after many years of trying for a baby, and right really on the limit of when they could carry on trying to conceive, she fell pregnant with twins. And this couple were part of our church. They were fully committed Christians. The rejoicing. Everyone was so thankful. And yet, you can probably tell what's coming. Neither of those children made it to full term. Both were stillborn. And I was there in the hospital with them when, bless her, she had to deliver these two babies. And she held them in her hands, and neither were fully formed, and one of them was hardly formed at all. And yet both of them, the couple had named them, and they had a proper funeral for them, which, as you can imagine, was a difficult occasion. But what they firmly believed, and what I firmly believe, is that one day, when they leave this world, this brief time here, and go to eternity, I said to them, you'll be what? They gave them names, they called them Ben and Jerry, for goodness sake. I says, when you enter heaven, I says, first people who come running up to you, there'll be these two fellas. You won't know them. And they'll say, hi, Mum, Dad, Ben, Jerry. And your joy will be complete. You see, this life is so short, so fleeting. It's a test, it's a trial, leading on to eternity, where everything comes into perspective. This life, the length of it, the quality of it is determined by God. Don't question God. Take what you have and give it your best. There was a lady I knew who was a headmistress at a local primary school. She died of cancer in her 40s. She was a fully committed Christian. She was beloved of everybody in the town. The funeral was massive. Guess who copped for the funeral? And at that particular funeral, she'd written a piece that she wanted read out. And I read it out. And it said, on this day, she said, many of you will question why I've gone. I was young, I had so much left to do. Why has she been taken? To those people I say this: when you are given a gift, you don't complain that it's not good enough or it's not long enough. You take hold of it and you live it to the absolute maximum for as long as you have it, and you give thanks along the way. And I thought, that is a Christian attitude. That is our Christian way of life. That's how we roll. We accept however much or however little God has given to us, knowing that one day we will have everything. Whoever can be trusted with very little can also be trusted with much. That's the promise. The next bit. Life is temporary. Life is a temporary assignment, as Mr. Warren put it. It's not destined to last forever. And here it is from 2 Corinthians. We fix our eyes not on what is seen, but what is unseen. What is seen is temporary. What is unseen is eternal. And yet in this life, in these times, 2023, this is how most people live, isn't it? People have a bucket list. This is a thing that's kind of entered our sort of language over the past 10, 20 years, isn't it? The bucket list. The things you promise yourself you're going to do before you kick the bucket. Yeah? All these things, often associated with travel, which is starting to become more of a challenge now. What with climate change, we're encouraged not to travel so much. But going around, everybody wants to see all of these key things like Machu Picchu and all the rest of it, before they die. They want to do this, they want to do that. People start living in camper vans and coming down to Cornwall. Yeah? I saw a sticker on a camper van, and it said, "One last adventure before dementia." And that's the thinking. That is the thinking, isn't it? Yeah? We've only got a short amount of time. We've got to make the absolute most of it. We'll cram as many brilliant experiences in as we possibly can. We've got to have all the holidays. We've got to have all the experience, own all the stuff that we want to own, do all the things that we want to do, because one day, ka-chunk, that'll be it, over, finished. What is the point of that? Because if one day, ka-chunk, it's finished, what does all of that stuff mean? And some people want to leave a legacy, don't they? They want to be remembered for all this stuff that they've achieved after they die. What is the point of that? Do you remember that statue of, I can't remember his Christian name, Mr. Colston in Bristol? who was a well-known benefactor of the time, built the Colston Hall, did lots of good stuff, amazing philanthropist, but sadly was involved in the slave trade. Do you remember during lockdown they toppled his statue into the dock because they wanted to forget all about him because he was a slave trader? This is called cancel culture. It's a very modern thing, isn't it? And that is, you look at stuff in history that you're not happy with, and you look at people in history that you're not happy with, and you say, oh, I don't like that. So we cancel them. We try and make out they never existed. Even if you want to leave a legacy, the chances are people will forget it. Do you remember the story Rick Warren tells in the book about the sports star at his school who wanted to win this massive sports cup and have it displayed in the school trophy cabinet forever with his name on it? And then eventually the school closed and the trophy just got thrown in the bin. All this legacy thing really doesn't matter. The way that we live our life now is to prepare us for what is to come, to prepare us for eternity. It's a temporary thing. What we learn in this life prepares us for eternity. Why doesn't God just take us straight there? Because we need to live, before we live in a place where there is no evil, where there is light but no darkness, where there is good but no evil, which is eternity. We need to experience what it's like to live in a place where there is both. But most importantly of all, we need to learn. The main lesson of this life is to learn about love. You see, God can't make us love him, and he can't make us love one another. Why not? Surely he's sovereign, he can make us do what he likes. Yes, but if you make somebody do something, if you don't give them the choice of not doing it, that's not an act of love. And it explains why we have to live in this world where Mr. Putin is slaughtering thousands of Ukrainians and thousands of Russians, his own people, for what? To leave his own legacy? This world of terrible injustice where people have so much, some people, but the vast majority have so little. This world where, having been given the job in this life of being stewards of God's creation, to look after it, quite obviously failed to do it. We've had to spend time in a place where there is light and darkness, good and evil, so that we can learn what love is. The choice. Freedom of choice. You cannot enter eternity until you have learned that difficult lesson, and that's the road we're all on, my friends. Is there anything else on this slide? Just one final thing. It's not about you, it's not about me, it's all about Jesus. It's all for him. The way that we live our lives, the way you spend the rest of today, whatever you're doing, however mundane, it's for him and nobody else.